This story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about daytime television. The green room at the View studio buzzed with the usual pre-show energy. Michael J. Fox sat quietly in his chair, reviewing his talking points for what was supposed to be a straightforward promotional interview for his latest Parkinson's Research Foundation initiative. His publicist, Sandra, paced nearby, checking her phone for last-minute updates. "Michael, they've bumped up your segment. You're going on in the first block instead of the second," Sandra informed him, her voice carrying a hint of concern. "That's fine," Michael replied, his voice steady despite the slight tremor that had become more pronounced over the years. "I'm ready to talk about the Foundation's new research partnerships. The work we're doing with stem cell therapy is really promising." What Michael didn't know was that in the main studio, Joy Behar was having a very different conversation with her producers. She had just finished reading through her notes, and her expression was far from pleased. "I don't understand why we're giving this guy a platform," Joy muttered to her producer Rachel, who stood beside her desk. "He's been pushing this research agenda for years, and frankly, I think people are getting tired of the sob stories." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "Joy, the audience loves Michael J. Fox. His foundation has raised millions for Parkinson's research, and he's incredibly respected." "Respected by who?" Joy shot back, her voice taking on that familiar edge that regular viewers knew all too well. "Look, I get that he's sick, but that doesn't mean we have to give him a free pass to promote whatever cause he wants. This is supposed to be a news show, not a charity telethon." The other co-hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farah Griffin, were reviewing their own notes when they overheard Joy's comments. Whoopi looked up with a frown. "Joy, what are you talking about? Michael J. Fox is coming on to discuss breakthrough research that could help millions of people. That's exactly the kind of story we should be covering." Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Whoopi, you're too soft. This guy's been dining out on his diagnosis for decades. At some point, we need to ask the hard questions. How much of this foundation money is actually going to research versus administrative costs? Why should taxpayers fund stem cell research when there are other priorities?" Sarah Haynes looked genuinely confused. "Joy, his foundation has one of the highest efficiency ratings of any major charity. Over 85% of donations go directly to research funding." "According to who?" Joy challenged. "According to his own foundation's marketing materials? Come on, Sarah, you're smarter than that." Meanwhile, back in the green room, Michael was doing his final preparation when Sandra's phone rang. It was Rachel, the producer. "Sandra, I need to give you a heads up." Rachel's voice was tense. "Joy seems to be in one of her moods today. She's asking some pointed questions about the Foundation's finances and research methods. I just wanted Michael to be prepared." Sandra's face darkened. "What kind of pointed questions? This was supposed to be about the new stem cell partnerships and the progress they're making." "I know, and that's still the plan. But Joy has been vocal about wanting to ask tougher questions. She feels like Michael gets too easy of a ride in interviews." "Are you kidding me?" Sandra's voice rose slightly. "Michael J. Fox gets an easy ride? The man has been living with Parkinson's for over 30 years and has dedicated his life to finding a cure. What exactly does she think is soft about that?" Michael, overhearing the conversation, gently touched Sandra's arm. "It's okay. I can handle whatever questions she has. I've been dealing with skeptics and critics my entire career. The research speaks for itself." But as the minutes ticked by and they were called to the set, even Michael couldn't have anticipated just how hostile the environment was about to become. As he walked through the backstage area, he could hear Joy's voice echoing from the studio, and her tone was anything but welcoming. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest claims to be making groundbreaking progress in Parkinson's research. But today, we're going to dig a little deeper into what that really means," Joy was saying to the live audience during the commercial break. Whoopi shot her a warning look. "Joy, let's keep this professional." "I am being professional, Whoopi. Professional means asking the questions that other interviewers are too starstruck to ask." As Michael made his way to the guest chair, the studio lights felt unusually bright, and the atmosphere was charged with an energy that felt more like a courtroom than a talk show. He settled into his chair, adjusted his microphone, and smiled at the panel of co-hosts. Though he couldn't help but notice, Joy's expression was notably cold. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi announced as they returned from commercial. "We're here with actor and activist Michael J. Fox, who is here to talk about his foundation's latest research initiatives." "Michael, It's great to have you here, Sarah said warmly. Can you tell us about these new partnerships you formed with research institutions? Michael smiled, grateful for the softball opening. Thank you for having me. We're really excited about our collaboration with Johns Hopkins and Stanford. We've identified some promising pathways for stem cell therapy that could potentially slow or even reverse some of the motor symptoms of Parkinson's. That sounds amazing, Alyssa chimed in. How close are we to actual treatments being available to patients? Well, we're still in early trials, but the preliminary results are encouraging. We're looking at a timeline of perhaps 5 to 7 years before we might see these therapies widely available, assuming continued funding and regulatory approval. It was at this moment that Joy decided to pounce. Michael, I have to ask you something that I think our viewers are wondering about, Joy interrupted, her voice taking on a prosecutorial tone. You've been running this foundation for over 20 years, and you're always asking for more money, more donations, more government funding. At what point do we say enough is enough? The studio fell silent. Michael's expression shifted from surprise to confusion. I'm sorry, Joy, I'm not sure I understand the question. Well, let me be more direct, Joy continued, leaning forward aggressively. Your foundation has raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet here you are, still asking for more money, still promising breakthroughs that seem to always be just around the corner. Don't you think people have a right to question whether this is really about finding a cure, or just about keeping the Michael J. Fox brand alive? The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Michael's face went through a series of emotions, shock, hurt, and then a steely determination that viewers rarely saw from the typically gentle actor. The other co-hosts looked mortified, with Whoopi actually gasping audibly. Joy, what are you doing? Whoopi whispered, but her microphone picked it up, broadcasting her dismay to millions of viewers. Michael took a deep breath, his hands visibly trembling, not just from his condition, but from the sheer audacity of what he'd just heard. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. Joy, I have to say, in 35 years of doing interviews, that might be the most insulting question I've ever been asked. Oh, come on, Michael, Joy shot back, completely undeterred. Don't play the victim card with me. You've built an empire on this disease. Book deals, speaking fees, foundation galas, where celebrities pay thousands of dollars to feel good about themselves. At some point, someone has to ask the hard questions. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Joy, I think maybe we should focus on the actual research achievements. No, Sarah, this is exactly what we should be talking about, Joy continued, her voice getting louder and more aggressive. I'm tired of everyone treating celebrities like they're saints just because they get sick. Michael, your foundation's tax filings show that you personally receive compensation as a board member. How much money have you made off your own disease? The studio audience began to murmur uncomfortably. Several people could be heard saying, this isn't right, and leave him alone. But Joy was just getting started. Michael's composure was remarkable, but viewers could see the pain in his eyes. Joy, I think you've been misinformed about how charitable foundations work. I don't receive any compensation from the Michael J. Fox Foundation. In fact, my wife and I have donated millions of our own money to the research efforts. According to who? Joy challenged. Your own accountants? Your own PR team? Michael, you're asking me to just take your word for it, and frankly, I'm not willing to do that anymore. Alyssa Farah Griffin finally found her voice. Joy, this is completely inappropriate. Michael J. Fox's foundation is rated as one of the most efficient and transparent charities in the world by multiple independent watchdog organizations. Those watchdog organizations are probably funded by the same pharmaceutical companies that benefit from his research grants. Joy countered, her conspiracy theories becoming more wild by the minute. Wake up, Alyssa. This is how the game works. You create a disease narrative, you get people emotional, and then you funnel money into research that benefits your corporate partners. Michael's jaw tightened. Joy, are you seriously suggesting that I'm faking my symptoms or that Parkinson's disease isn't real? I'm not saying you're faking anything, Joy replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. I'm saying that you've weaponized your condition to create a financial empire. And now you're here asking hardworking Americans to fund research that might never produce results while you live in a mansion in Connecticut. The audience was getting restless now. Someone in the crowd shouted, "This is disgusting," and others began to boo. Whoopi tried to regain control. Okay, we need to take this down a notch, Whoopi said, but Joy wasn't finished. No, Whoopi, we don't need to take anything down. We need to ask why this man gets a free pass when other people with chronic illnesses don't get foundation deals and celebrity fundraisers. What makes Michael J. Fox so special? Michael's response was delivered with a quiet dignity that made Joy's attacks seem even more vicious by comparison. What makes me special, Joy, is that I had a platform when I was diagnosed, and I chose to use that platform to try to help other people who are suffering from the same condition. I could have retreated from public life, but I didn't, because I believed I had a responsibility to use whatever influence I had to make a difference. Oh please, Joy scoffed, spare me the noble sacrifice speech. You used your diagnosis to revive a career that was already declining. Family Ties was over, your movie career was stalling, and then suddenly, you had a new angle to stay relevant. The cruelty of the comment was so stark that even Joy's usual supporters in the audience fell silent. Sarah Haynes looked like she was about to cry. Joy, that's enough, Sarah said firmly. You're way out of line here. But Michael held up a hand. No, Sarah, let her finish. I want to hear what other brilliant insights Joy has about my life and my motivations. Joy, apparently unable to recognize sarcasm when it was directed at her, continued her assault. Fine, you want me to finish? Here's what I think. I think you've convinced yourself that you're some kind of hero, but really, you're just another celebrity who found a way to monetize tragedy. And the worst part is, you've got everyone else convinced too. You know what the worst part actually is, Joy? Michael's voice was still controlled, but there was steel in it now. The worst part is that there are millions of people watching this show right now who have Parkinson's disease or have family members with Parkinson's disease, and you're telling them that the research we're doing to try to help them is somehow fraudulent or self-serving. If the shoe fits, Joy shrugged, seemingly oblivious to the impact of her words. Michael looked directly into the camera. For anyone watching who has Parkinson's or any other neurological condition, please don't let this woman's cynicism discourage you from supporting legitimate research efforts. There are real scientists doing real work to find real cures, and they need our support. Joy's face reddened. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. I'm asking legitimate questions that journalists should have been asking for years. You're not asking questions, Joy, Michael replied, his voice rising for the first time. You're making accusations without any factual basis. You're spreading conspiracy theories about medical research, and you're doing it to a person who is living with the very condition you're claiming is being exploited. I never said the condition was being exploited, Joy backtracked slightly. I said you were exploiting it. That's even worse, Whoopi interjected, having heard enough. Joy, you need to apologize right now. I'm not apologizing for doing my job, Joy shot back. Someone has to hold these people accountable. Michael leaned forward in his chair. Hold me accountable for what, exactly? For dedicating my life to trying to find treatments for a disease that affects over 10 million people worldwide? For using whatever platform I have to raise awareness and funding for research? For continuing to work and advocate even as my own symptoms get worse? For making millions of dollars while doing it, Joy replied without missing a beat. The studio erupted, the audience began booing loudly, and several people stood up and headed for the exits. Whoopi was frantically signaling to the producers to cut to commercial, but Joy kept talking. You all can boo me if you want, but somebody has to ask these questions. Somebody has to point out that Emperor has no clothes. Michael's response was measured and devastating. Joy, the only person here without clothes is you. You've exposed yourself as someone who would rather attack a person with a chronic illness than do 5 minutes of research about the work his foundation actually does. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point. Joy's face was flushed with anger, and she seemed completely oblivious to the fact that she had lost not just the audience, but her own co-hosts as well. What happened next would go down as one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. You know what, Michael? Joy's voice took on a mocking tone that made everyone in the studio cringe. Maybe if you spent less time at fancy galas and more time actually in the lab, you might have found a cure by now. The comment was so cruel, so completely tone-deaf, that it seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. Michael's face went pale, and for a moment, his trademark composure finally cracked. Excuse me? Michael's voice was barely above a whisper, but the hurt in it was unmistakable. Whoopi had heard enough. That's it. We're done here. Joy, you've completely lost your mind. But Joy wasn't backing down. I'm lost? I'm the only one here with the courage to ask real questions. Everyone else is too starstruck to do their job. My job, Sarah Haynes said, her voice shaking with emotion, is not to attack guests who come here in good faith to discuss important issues. My job is not to spread conspiracy theories about medical research. Oh, spare me the righteousness, Sarah, Joy snapped. You're all acting like I committed some kind of crime. I asked tough questions. That's what journalists do. Michael finally stood up from his chair, his movement deliberate and dignified despite the visible tremor in his hands. Joy, I've been interviewed by some of the toughest journalists in the world. Mike Wallace, Barbara Walters, Anderson Cooper. None of them ever felt the need to question my basic humanity or suggest that I was profiting from my own suffering. Well, maybe they should have, Joy shot back, seemingly incapable of recognizing when to stop. No. Michael's voice was firm now, stronger than it had been all morning. Maybe you should learn the difference between journalism and cruelty. Maybe you should understand that asking tough questions doesn't mean abandoning basic human decency. The audience erupted in applause, a thunderous response that lasted nearly 30 seconds. Joy looked around, clearly frustrated that her attacks weren't resonating with anyone. You can all applaud if you want, Joy said into her microphone. But in 6 months when he's back here asking for more money with another sob story, remember this conversation. That was the final straw. Michael looked directly at Joy, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of 3 decades of experience dealing with his condition and the people who doubted him. Joy, I want you to listen to me very carefully. In my 30 years of living with Parkinson's disease, I have met thousands of patients and families who are dealing with this condition. I have seen people lose their ability to walk, to speak, to feed themselves. I have watched brilliant minds trapped in bodies that no longer respond to their commands. And in all that time, through all of that pain and struggle, I have never encountered anyone as callous and cruel as you have been here today. The studio was dead silent. Even the camera operators had stopped moving. Michael continued, You want to question my foundation's finances? Fine, they're public record. You want to question the effectiveness of our research? Great. Talk to the scientists at Harvard, Stanford, and Johns Hopkins who are doing the work. But don't you ever suggest that people who are suffering from neurological diseases are somehow less deserving of help because you don't like the messenger. Joy, for the first time all morning, seemed momentarily speechless. But she quickly recovered her antagonistic stance. I never said people don't deserve help, she protested weakly. Yes, you did, Alyssa Farah Griffin interjected. You said it when you suggested that Michael's foundation is somehow fraudulent. You said it when you implied that Parkinson's research is a scam. You said it when you mocked him for not finding a cure fast enough. Michael began removing his microphone. I came here to talk about hope, to talk about genuine scientific breakthroughs that could help millions of people. Instead, I've been subjected to a character assassination based on nothing but cynicism and conspiracy theories. Where are you going? Joy demanded, as if she had any right to control the situation at this point. I'm leaving, Michael said simply. I don't have to sit here and listen to someone question my integrity and my motives when all I've ever tried to do is help people who are going through what I'm going through. Whoopi stood up as well. Michael, I am so sorry. This is not what The View is supposed to be about. I know it's not, Whoopi, Michael replied graciously. You've always been a class act. This isn't on you. But Joy wasn't finished. You can walk out if you want, but that doesn't change the questions I raised. Running away doesn't make you right. Michael stopped and turned back to face her one final time. Joy, I'm not running away from your questions. I'm walking away from your cruelty. There's a difference, though I don't expect you to understand it. Don't be so dramatic, Joy called out as Michael headed toward the exit. This is what real journalism looks like. Michael paused at the edge of the set and addressed the audience directly. Ladies and gentlemen, real journalism is about seeking truth and informing the public. What you witnessed here today was something else entirely. To anyone watching who has Parkinson's or any other condition that affects your daily life, please don't let this discourage you from advocating for yourself and seeking the help you deserve. As Michael walked off the set, the audience gave him a standing ovation that lasted over a minute. Several people in the crowd were openly crying, and many were shouting support for him and criticism of Joy. Joy, incredibly, seemed to interpret this as vindication. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. He can't handle tough questions, so he plays the victim and gets everyone emotional. Sarah Haynes had tears in her eyes. Joy, what you did here today wasn't journalism. It was bullying. It was cruel. And it was wrong. I disagree, Joy replied defiantly, and I'd do it again. The producers were frantically signaling from off-camera, trying to get the show back on track, but the damage was done. Whoopi looked directly into the camera. We're going to take a break, she announced, her voice heavy with emotion. When we come back, we'll have a very different conversation. But as the cameras stopped rolling and the studio lights dimmed, it was clear that something fundamental had shifted. Joy sat alone at the panel, isolated from her co-hosts and facing an audience that had completely turned against her. Meanwhile, backstage, Michael J. Fox was surrounded by crew members and staffers who wanted to apologize for what they had witnessed. The confrontation that was supposed to be Joy's moment of journalistic triumph had instead revealed her to be exactly what Michael had called her, cruel and callous, someone who would weaponize another person's suffering for the sake of creating controversy. For viewers at home, the choice between the dignified man fighting a devastating disease and the host who attacked him for it wasn't really a choice at all. As Michael left the building that day, he carried himself with the same grace and dignity he had shown throughout his career. Joy Behar, on the other hand, had shown the world exactly who